Yo, what is up, guys? Today we're going to be doing a One Piece fights tier list. Now let's get into these tiers. Obviously, top tier, we're going to reserve that for the best in the series. We're only going to put one fight in there. Iconic, obviously, if it's iconic or just a great fight, fun to watch. If it's a really good fight, fine. If it's a fight that's just all right, average, boring, not a good fight. Most of these tiers are pretty self-explanatory. Let's get started with Kizaru versus Straw Hats. That's not really much of a fight, to be honest. Kind of a one-sided beating. So I'll just put it in fine. We got Oars versus Straw Hats. I might put this in fun to watch. I think I'll fine, maybe. I'm still good. Yeah, we'll go fine. We'll just go with fine for that one. Kuma versus Straw Hats. Same thing as Kizaru versus Straw Hats. Not really much of a fight. I think Mr. 4 versus Usopp, yeah, it's just fine. Usopp versus Chu, just fine. Let's see, what do we got next? Who is that? Yeah, Jabra versus Sanji. That's thinking about fun to watch, but might go fine. Yeah, we'll go fun to watch. It's a good fight. Nah, I'll put it in fine. Yeah, well, moving on. We got Sanji versus that one fishman guy, Morobi, maybe his name was. Can't remember off the top of my head. It's fine. Mr. Chi versus Sanji is fine. Sanji versus whatever that guy's name was is fine. If I can't remember his name, it can't be about fine. Now, Sanji versus Queen is pretty sick. It's a pretty good fight. I'll put it in fun to watch. Nami versus Khalifa, I'll put in fun to watch. Now, I am trying to figure out this one right here. Is that Robin versus Black Maria? If it is, I'll put it in fun to watch. Alright, I think that's what that fight is. Whatever. Moving on. This one, Robin versus that big guy fight, I'll put it in boring. And I don't even remember it showing most of that fight. So it can't be that good. Iconic, Pika versus Zoro. Obviously a very iconic moment. Usopp versus Luffy. It's not a great fight, but it is iconic. So I think it deserves to be there. Sanji versus Luffy, I really hated that fight. Freaking Wapol versus Luffy, I thought about putting it fine, but I think I'm going to put it in. It's not a very good fight. Zoro versus Whiskey Peak, it's a very cool moment. Again, not much of a fight, kind of a one-sided beating. Again, I think Oars versus Nightmare Luffy, that's pretty sick. But again, it's kind of the same fight as like Oars versus Straw Hats. It's just kind of a different phase of that fight, I guess. Nami versus Miss Double Finger, whatever her name is. That's a pretty fun fight to watch. We'll put that in that tier. We got next. I can't really tell. It's Sanji versus somebody. I can't really tell who's fighting, so I'll just put that in fine. Alright, we got Luffy versus Koro, that one's fine. Luffy versus Rob Lucci, that's one of the best fights in One Piece. I don't think it's the best, but it's definitely one of the best. Hands down. It's a great fight. Luffy versus Don Creek, we'll put in fine. Luffy versus Magellan, that's a pretty good one. Zoro versus Monet. Yeah, it's pretty good. I'll put it in fun to watch tier. It had a really cool ending mostly. And then I honestly can't even really tell who that fight is. It's one of those Skypea fights I'll put in fine tier. As cool as Afro Luffy is, Luffy versus Foxy is definitely not that good a fight. The Mr. 3 fight, not that entertaining. Let's see which one of these we're going to do next. Cody Jones fight, it should be a C tier. I would put it a C tier, but it's way too long. If it was shorter, it'd be fine, or it maybe even be good, but it's just way too long. Like, it should have ended so many times before it actually did end. Now, Katakuri versus Luffy is honestly one of my favorite fights. I'm considering putting it the best, but there is one that I think probably deserves it a little bit more, and everybody probably knows which one that is. But I do want to say it's one of my favorite fights. Moving on, Crocodile versus Luffy. It's pretty iconic. Water Luffy, etc., etc. Dofi versus Luffy, obviously iconic, top tier. I think Enel versus Luffy, pretty good fight. Mr. One versus Zoro, pretty good fight. Kaido versus Luffy, obviously the best fight. Freaking sick. We get Gear 5, back and forth. There's a lot of different people involved. Like I said, I mean, I really love the Katakuri Luffy fight. I highly considered putting it in the top spot, but it can only be one. Now we've got these Luffy Bellamy fights. I think they're both cool. The first one, it's cool to just see him just knock out Bellamy in one punch, after all the crap Bellamy talked. And the second one I thought was still cool. I know Bellamy gets some crap in Dressrosa, but I think his character arc was actually pretty interesting. Aokiji, same thing as Kizaru, is a one-sided beating. It wasn't much of a fight. It was cool to watch, but it was, again, it's not much of a fight. Now we've got Luffy versus Arlong. That's a good one. A really good early one, too. Luffy versus Buggy, it's fine. Luffy versus Caesar's fine. Luffy versus Cracker, I think, was a really underrated fight. It was a pretty cool fight. Probably one of the more underrated fights in the series. I think it's pretty good. So, yeah, I don't think people give it enough credit. Although, I guess it drags on a little bit. But anyway, moving on. I think next we got Frankie, what's his name? Senior Pink. That's another really underrated fight right here. A really manly fight. It gets a little silly, but that's fun too. Anyway, moving on. These manga panel fights, I can barely tell who some of these are. I think that's Frankie versus Zaki. A lot of these Toby Roppo versus like Straw Hat fights, they're pretty good. They kind of get yada yada a little bit, which means they kind of, but also like they don't drag on too much. Like they're just the perfect amount. They're just like little appetizers for like the main course fights in Wano, which is pretty nice. So we got Jinbei versus Who's Who, Sasaki versus Frankie. All those guys. All these CP9 fights were pretty cool too. We got Frankie versus that Zipper guy. And blah blah blah. Zoro versus Kaku's a really good fight. I think that's Zoro versus King. That definitely. I don't know if it's iconic, but it's definitely good enough to be in a top tier. Sugar versus Usopp. It's not the most entertaining fight, but it does lead to an iconic moment. So I think maybe it should be an iconic tier. Let's see which one we do next. That is Perona versus Usopp is fine. It's kind of fun to watch. Zoro versus Hachi is fine. Now, Big Mom versus Law and Kid. Kid is my favorite character, so I'm gonna put it in the top. Best in the series. Virgo versus Law is cool, and then obviously iconic Whitebeard versus the freaking Admirals, especially Akainu. Freaking sick fight. So I'll scroll through here and see. I'm not going to go through all these again, obviously. But you know what? I'm not going to. I'll just put up a picture. Yeah, here's the full tier list, total tier list. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you watched this whole thing, I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to check out Coffee Brand Coffee. 10% off organic coffee and tea, the best coffee and tea you ever had. And again, I hope you enjoyed the video. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, you son of a